One Sunday afternoon, on his way into a broadcasting studio during the golden age of radio, that would be about 3 technologies ago. Not long after he had arrived in Boston as president of the Old American Unitarian Association, Frederick May Elliott was handed a slip of paper. It was handed to him by a stranger, and it asked, "Why isn't it possible for a person to have a genuine and satisfactory religion without bothering with churches?" It's a question that many of you have asked yourselves, I'm sure, and even though you choose to participate as a member or friend of this religious community, you may yet believe that it's entirely possible to have a spiritual life, a satisfactory spiritual life, without belonging to a spiritual community of any sort. While acknowledging that the spiritual life was profoundly personal, Frederick Elliott responded that it can never be a purely private affair. A devoted institutionalist, he believed that the church was indispensable to the creation and support of spiritual values for both individuals and for society as a whole. In the face of both individual and social need, Elliott urged religious liberals to fashion a common faith that creates a living fellowship of believers. "My friend," he said, "you talk about religion as though it were something entirely personal, a private possession of your own, as strictly a matter of your individual concern as your bank account, or your motor car, or your preference in hats or motion pictures." I just love the archaic language of that passage. This was his response to the anonymous letter writer, which he offered a couple of weeks later, as I recall. He pointed out that his correspondence letter was entirely self-focused and seemingly unconcerned with anyone or anything but himself. In doing so, Frederick Elliott revealed that he was much braver than I have ever been. But he argued that the whole purpose of religion is to draw each of us out of ourselves, revealing to us the vast network of human and even cosmic relationships which alone give meaning to individual lives. Religion can never be a matter of private concern, he said, because by its very nature, it is social in the fullest sense of the word. This social nature of religion demands social expression. A congregation, whether a church or a synagogue, a mosque or sangha, is both a visible sign that spirituality is more than a private affair and also a vehicle for connecting with others on the deepest level about the most profound concerns of human life. In a solitude that ignores or rejects the need for expressing in terms of fellowship the deep impulses of the spiritual nature, cautioned Elliott, you can never find or keep the unreachable riches for which your whole being hungers. Only when you become part of such a fellowship can you discover and lay hold upon the fullness of spiritual life which you desire. He observed that arguments for and against spiritual communities were little different than those made by some about education or labor, government or social movements, or any of the other human activities that bring people together in a common purpose. Some may have enormous confidence in self-education. Go educate yourself, we tell people online. But for most, the school provides a disciplined approach to learning and the shared resources to support it. Some may fancy that they can do better for themselves by negotiating the terms of their employment directly with their employers. Good luck with that. It was trade unions and professional associations that won improved compensation and labor standards for working people. Some cynically scoff at government and see it as a problem to be solved. But governments have a vital role to play in maintaining civil order, providing public infrastructure, ensuring access to health care, and providing a social safety net. And some may well lead satisfying spiritual lives on their own. But it is in the religious community that we can test our ideas, guarding against error, share our stories, and walk together with companions on life's journey. In each of these cases, we are generally better together. The church is the institution by means of which we seek to foster and promote the values of faith and character in the lives of people, according to Frederick Elliott. The one human institution thus far available for the creation and support of spiritual values. And if a religious community is nothing else, it is a school for the development and nurturance of human character and spiritual refinement, intellectual refinement. We can cobble together a fanciful metaphysics on our own. We can ponder the meaning of existence in the glorious comfort of our own company. We can retreat to the backyards and decks of our own homes and enjoy our surroundings as we will. But the development of character and refinement of our religious ideas, our guiding philosophy, our life stance, calls us to relationship with one another, relationship with kindred spirits, to the living community of believers and seekers, and yes, even doubters, who constitute the liberal church. In fairness, churches and other religious communities do not hold a monopoly on the social expression of religion. Today, there are many places other than congregations where one can explore spiritual questions and enjoy the company of others in doing so. There are many kinds of clubs and self-help groups that provide a social context for religious exploration. There are so-called philosophers' cafes, online discussion platforms, college classes, service clubs, recovery groups, libraries, reading clubs, spiritual roundtables, and an untold number of informal groups with a spiritual or philosophical focus. Yet churches and other congregations still stand out as multi-generational communities offering a wide range of services, including worship and education, pastoral care and social engagement, not to mention many paths to put faith in action for the betterment of society and the world. Beyond being spiritual communities, congregations are, in the words of Robert Putnam, an important incubator for social skills, civic norms, community interests, and civic engagement. He adds that they are places where people give speeches, run meetings, manage disagreements, and bear administrative responsibility generally serving as recruiting grounds for other community activities. He notes that churchgoers are substantially more likely to be involved in secular organizations, to vote and participate politically in other ways, and to have deeper informal social connections. One of my early mentors, Joan Goodwin, a birthright universalist and religious educator who served as director of congregational services at the Unitarian Universalist Association, observed that beyond the family, no other institution in modern life includes people as whole human beings throughout the life cycle. So it is often to the church that people turn in their hunger for the integrating force of community. She maintained that this is especially important in an era in which we face unprecedented social change, where transience and alienation are the order of the day, where loneliness is observable everywhere, while the stability of family life, however we define it, and civil society are apparently breaking down. Historically, the religious communities that dot the land, from city centers to remote rural communities, have been the major contributor to what is known as social capital, which consists of networks of relationships that weave individuals into groups and communities. Creating social capital takes time and effort, and it typically develops locally, spreading out over ever-widening social networks. Sadly, social capital in North American society has been in decline for half a century or longer. In his book, Bowling Alone, Robert Putnam drew attention to the ways in which community life was in decline. The book took its name from the documented increase in the number of people who could be found in bowling alleys who were there on their own, rather than bowling in a league or even as a part of a group of friends. I remember saying at the time that the book first appeared in 2000 that I felt Putnam was overstating his case. Less than 5 years later, I repented. I was convinced that he had understated it, that the problem was much greater than we realized. From service clubs to churches, social capital has been evaporating like Elon Musk's equity in Twitter. From the early 1970s, Americans began to join less, trust less, give less, vote less, and even schmooze less. By Putnam's calculations, during the last third of the 20th century, participation in social organizations, churches, social clubs, and labor unions declined by somewhere between 25 and 50%. And similar declines can be shown in philanthropic giving and even time spent with family, friends, and neighbors. Is it any wonder that we yell at one another on social media, hitting the caps button to make our point? Is it any wonder that society has become increasingly polarized? And it turns out that the Canadian numbers are not much different. They track the US numbers quite precisely. And when the decline in social capital is accompanied by growing personal isolation and increased social and political polarization, as we have seen especially over the last 2 decades, the consequences threaten to be catastrophic. That's why this congregation is so important. That's actually why congregations that teach doctrines we don't agree with are so important. We meet each other as friends and neighbors anywhere and everywhere, but seldom do so in the consciousness of our soul's deeper yearnings, said A. Powell Davies. In church, we do, in a way that leaves us knowing that we all have the same, or at least similar yearning, the same spiritual need of assurance, of faith and hope. We are brought together at the highest level possible. We are not merely an audience, we're a congregation. And that's why we're better together. However deeply personal our spiritual lives may be, and I hope yours are as deep as they could possibly be, they are deepened even further when we gather together in religious community. Our errors are more likely to be corrected. Our insights are more likely to be refined and affirmed. Our social needs are more likely to be satisfied. In short, our lives are richer when we join others on a shared journey of discovery. We are, and always will be, better together. Please join in the closing hymn, number 1028 in the Teal hymnal, Fire of Commitment.